Welcome to She Defined, the podcast for smart, savvy women who are in search of more. I'm your host, Sharon Green. Today, I'm joined by Kelly Allison, a kinesiologist, medical intuitive, and holistic counsellor. She owns a wellness clinic called The Holistic Hub. She guides people through self-healing practices, helping them to become more in tune with their emotions, live healthier lives, and find their authenticity. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. Hi.
So great to have you here today.
Thank you.
I want to begin by asking about kinesiology, especially for any of our listeners who may not be familiar with it. What is it and how do you employ kinesiology to treat your patients?
Yes. So kinesiology is a holistic healing modality, and we use a lot of Chinese medicine principles, so meridians and the flow of energy in the body. We incorporate counselling principles. I've also done some additional training. So, all of that additional training comes in. A kinesiology session is called a balance, and that's really telling because we balance the mind, body and spirit. We don't treat disease. We don't diagnose disease. We deal with the symptoms and the emotional root cause that has gone on to affect, your thoughts, your mind and your body.
Great. There may be some people that are skeptical of kinesiology because I know it can be controversial,
Yes.
but how would you say kinesiology is something that you might approach? Is it something you need to be open to as a therapy?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I would say at the beginning, there was always people who had already drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak. But often we would get clients who have tried everything and would come to a kinesiologist out of desperation. I just see that happening less and less. I see that people are now so much more aware of even just being proactive about their emotional and mental health. They may not fully understand the connection between your thoughts and feelings and your physical health. You don't have to get the whole concept. You go to a doctor, you don't know everything the doctor knows. You go to a mechanic, you just end up trusting that person. So I think that what drives people nowadays is the growth in spirituality and a spiritual mindset, but also people wanting to be much more proactive about their health and general well-being.
That's great. I want to talk a bit about anxiety.
Yes.
It's a very common thing that many women experience, and you help people work through things like anxiety.
Absolutely.
I want to explore both anxiety and depression. And how they impact the body and the overall health.
Yep.
So starting with anxiety, how would you define this? How does it present in the body?
Yes. So from an energetic perspective, we look at anxiety as unprocessed fear. So basically you'll have an unprocessed fear that meets a projected future fear, and it's boom. The body might as well be, back at whatever time and age you first experienced that fear. Anxiety is irrational because no one can just say, hey, don't worry about it, and you feel fine. Anxiety can manifest in lots and lots of different ways. For me, if I'm anxious, I'll get changed 25 times. Like I'll just change my clothes as a sort of way to control how I'm perceived and how I'm seen to manage social anxiety. Took me a really long time to understand what that is, but it plays out really differently for a lot of people, and for some people it can be debilitating. You might not be able to get out of bed in the morning from the thoughts in your head. So it like everything, there's a big spectrum, but that's how we look at it.
When we talk about the symptoms of anxiety, how might that play out day to day? Because there may be some people that experience anxiety, but they don't know that that's what it is.
Yeah.
You mentioned getting changed multiple times. Does it sort of present as kind of like twitchy or needing to get that nervous energy out in certain ways? Like what are some other examples of how it might sort of come out, I guess?
So anger. I don't think people connect anger with anxiety, but think of being in constant discomfort in your body. You're going to have a short fuse. I know if I raise my voice, tends to be, because I'm just so wired, Look, anxiety can create, it can make you just really tired. You can get a lot of tension in your body. Obviously that feeling in the pit of your tummy or in your chest. Anxiety can also manifest as perfectionism or avoidance. So it's like, if I just focus on this one thing and get it right, then I'll feel better. We can have health anxiety, which we've seen over the last couple of years, people terrified of not being well, and, how that can then make, a challenging life even more challenging. So it can play out in lots and lots of different ways. And I think that's why it can be hard for people to even realize that they might be anxious.
Yeah. And do you think it is a lot about worrying about what's coming next? Because they often talk about anxiety as being worry about the future or stuff that hasn't played out yet, and then getting kind of caught up in all of that.
So control.
Yeah.
Control is a derivative of fear, and anxiety is fear. So a controlling person is a fearful person that doesn't trust the outcome. So at some point they were probably anxious. They probably still are, but it just shows up in a different way. I don't like to dismiss or accept controlling behaviour, but when you look at it as fear and possibly anxiety, you can manage that person and manage yourself in a really different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there such thing as healthy anxiety? Let me preface it with this.
Yeah.
Can you feel nervous before a job interview, but then it helps you to perform well, versus that recurring anxiety that becomes crippling? So I just want to know, what's the difference between maybe a healthy dose of anxiety, if you think it exists, versus something that's unhealthy?
It exists. I had healthy anxiety this morning. It's perspective. When you put your heart and soul into something, when something means something to you, if you put a lot of effort and energy into it, I'd almost go as far as to say you should be a little bit anxious. Without sounding corny, another way that we look at anxiety is like, I could have been sitting in the car this morning waiting to walk in here and go, I'm anxious. And a part of me is, because it's important to me, but I'm also excited. And they're just a whisker apart, and absolutely, if you can look at it and go, yeah, it means something to me, I should be a little bit anxious, but also am I a little bit excited? Job interviews, things like this, career things, presentations, things that you put a lot of effort and energy into. That is what I consider healthy anxiety.
Okay, great. Why do you think so many of us are anxious today?
It's a few.
Where do we start?
There's a few ways to answer that. Look, we could look at the sort of societal, generational thing. My parents are baby boomers, and, their parents lived through wars and depressions and many other things. But more to the point, the way we treated children and raised them was really different. The seen and not heard generation. And whilst our parents might be different and parenting is different, it still flows through. Like, if you weren't raised to be emotionally aware, emotionally open, or emotionally mature, you can't give that to another person. So there's absolutely an element of that. But, we can't go past social media and technology and the 24-hour news cycle and, sitting still, talking about something and wanting to get up from the dinner table and Google the answer. Like, when do we give ourselves a break?
Is it too much stimulation all the time and not enough downtime away from it to just take a beat and go, let's just have a minute to relax the nervous system? And
those dopamine hits. Some people just have to be busy all the time, and you have to train yourself out of that, and you will feel really uncomfortable when you're not achieving, when you're not doing something, and that's going back to that perfectionism or avoidance. So you keep yourself busy to avoid feelings that you don't know what to do with.
Yeah. There's too many opportunities to avoid feeling that discomfort that you talk about.
Yeah.
So we fill it with things like scrolling and
online shopping
and all of it. Yeah. For anyone who has experienced long-term anxiety, so something that's been with them for many years, because they may not know how to address it, or maybe they haven't found a way to manage it effectively, How do you see it manifest in the body over a long-term period?
Look, it often will eventually become some sort of physical disease or ailment. It can get into that sort of autoimmune territory because that's when your body's in a constant heightened state of stress. It can manifest in the chest, in the diaphragm, in the tummy. Digestive issues are really common. Energy levels can eventually, become less, and you can have pain in your body, quite similar to what people that deal with depression deal with as well. But it's just that constant hypervigilance. You're easily startled. Bright lights annoy you, sound annoys you, because you're already up here, and that any sort of additional stimulation can just tip you over the edge.
Do you view that as like a capacity thing? Like maybe your tolerance for capacity is already maxing out, and so any little thing is just going to tick you off. And
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you have any tips for coping strategies that people can employ to manage their anxiety?
Yeah, I think, look, anxiety isn't a quick fix. It's the 1%ers, and it's sort of a negotiation with yourself type scenario. You've got like the devil on your shoulder, the angel on the other, and the devil's like, don't do that. It's hard. It's not gonna work out, and then you've got the little angel going, you can do it. Just try, and you do often have to negotiate with yourself. So it can be things like, with social anxiety, go with someone, ask someone, can I arrive with you? I have to play wife with my husband through his business ventures sometimes, and it's not always easy. So I'll just simply say to him, don't leave me, stay with me, I'll leave you when I'm feeling comfortable, But the other way I like to manage anxiety is, to ask yourself, if you were to turn around the corner and bump into a group of 5 people you didn't know very well, what would you do? You'd just deal with it. You might not be your best self. You might do or say something that's a little bit goofy. You might not be at your optimum, but you'll be okay, and we can often go, think of a time when you've managed a situation that you're now freaking out about. You probably got through it. And I think the other thing is, being okay, getting through something and everything going your way are completely different. We're not after perfectionism. We're after just doing the best we can in the moment based on what we're dealing with. Striving for perfectionism, it's not going to help when you're anxious.
Now, what about depression? How would you define that differently to anxiety? I know a lot of people can have both, but if we're speaking specifically about depression, how does that present?
Yeah, so again, from a spiritual, emotional root cause perspective, we look at depression as ultimately a disconnection from self. And depression is often a trauma response. So there'll be, a pain that's been pushed down. I think of depression as repressed anger. So anxiety is fear and depression is anger. That doesn't mean you're an angry person or you're an aggressive person. It means that there's this pain within you that you haven't been able to do anything about. It becomes overwhelming. You switch your heart off to the pain, but then you switch your heart off to the good things. So you might feel less pain, but you feel less happiness. And it's the happiness and the positive things in our life that sustain us, that give us resilience and a reserve of energy to call on when things are hard. So, depression is a void. It's a nothingness.
I think we're hearing a lot more about the concept of repressing emotions.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are doing it without even realizing. Why do you think we do it?
Because we're taught to, and it often is just that childhood thing, and it isn't about having bad parents. It's sort of nature and nurture. But if a child comes to you with a feeling and you say, don't worry about that, that's an automatic response from the brain to push it down and ignore that feeling. It just sits there and festers. children are much more perceptive and sensitive to their environment than we've ever given them credit. We're adults playing out childhood programming. So if our parents didn't speak of their feelings, if they hid things, you just automatically do that, but we are talking about it. We are understanding it. We are supporting our friends through it as best we can. And, children are being raised differently, so it is changing.
What's the difference between feeling sad periodically,
yes,
and experiencing an ongoing low mood to a point where you would classify someone as being depressed?
Yes. So, we can't classify as people as being depressed within kinesiology. It's always about that root cause. I say that if you're sad, you're not depressed. And that's not strictly true, but it speaks to the void and the nothingness, the lack of desire, the lack of purpose, the lack of wanting. If you're sad, you're still feeling something. Of course you can be sad when you're depressed, but it just speaks to that energetic way of looking at depression. There's times in life when you should be sad, the same as there's reasonable expectations of anxiety. If you experience loss or trauma or something really significant happens to you, you should be sad. One of the less wonderful things about spirituality is, that's okay. There's a lesson. Everything happens for a reason. Someone's cat dies, their mum dies, and they ride off their car. No one wants to hear that. They should be sad. They have to go through that. When it starts becoming depression or more in that realm is when you just feel like there's no point, and I look for that language as much as I look for, the physical symptoms. It's the things people say, like I spend the weekend in bed, or I get home from work and I go straight to bed. What's the point? Showing that there's almost nothing to look forward to. That's the difference that I see.
Yeah. And energetically, is it almost presenting like a numbness?
Yeah.
Because there isn't that engagement with the feelings as much as there should be. Yeah. For women specifically, when we're talking about depression, do you see any other common themes or maybe language that comes up for them?
I think for women it's but that's okay. There'll be like this big, terrible, download of information, but that's okay. And I'm like, it's not okay. It's actually not okay. And you can say that's not okay, without being a terrible person. It's like, and another thing that I think we see a lot with women is, the self-sacrifice. I didn't have a choice. I had to, like, no one else is going to do it, but that's okay because, like, it's not okay. Sometimes I think women carry so much of a different load, so different to men. Men carry a whole different load. For women, it's the mental load. We're raised different to boys, and women are supposed to present and show different things to men. Have you ever seen a photo of Adam Sandler?
Yeah, plenty of times.
Like in the big oversized basketball shorts, socks with slides before that was a thing, like he looks almost like a hobo. Good luck to him. But what do we say about women who step out dressed like that?
Their life's falling apart. She hasn't got it together.
She's let herself go. Where's her self-respect? Like it's just those insidious little things that put pressure on women in a different way to men. And, it doesn't always encourage us to show our true selves, so we push things down and be who we think we should be. Catches up on you when you're giving more than you're getting back.
So interesting. Maybe this could be a generalization, but do you think a lot of women have high functioning depression? And by that, I mean they might be deeply sad and unhappy, but they continue to appear functional in their day-to-day life. So they're turning up to work every day, they're keeping their home running well, they're managing their family and retaining other responsibilities. I don't know if you see this present a lot in women, and maybe this is the difference between men and women. Might be generalizing, as I'm saying, but I think I see this a lot in women personally.
Yeah.
And how are you seeing that high functioning depression kind of play out? Like, what does that look like? Because again, women may not know that they've got this.
Yeah. And look, agreed it is a generalization, but I agree as a generalization that it's a thing. It can play out as like being a really good employee, a really good boss, and coming home and just crashing and having nothing left. It can sort of be really close to burnout. I've experienced that sort of thing where I'd get home from work and I'd just sort of sit on the couch for half an hour and just be, staring at a wall. Depressed, maybe not, closer to burnout, but it's a similar type thing, and we sometimes try and get control in any aspect of our lives that we can. So, if I'm like rearranging the pantry at home, everyone's like, okay, what's going on here? It's like you control the things that you love to control. I love to do the washing because it's a tangible thing that I know, I can complete and tick off the list. It's control. And, high functioning women don't like to show that they're not okay. So they go out into the world and, put that mask on and show everyone that they're great, but then they almost have nothing left at the end of the day. Whether that's actually depression, I'm not sure. It can very much lead to depression, but at an absolute minimum, it's showing you that something's really out of balance,
Okay. In what ways, when you're dealing with patients and the way that you work, do you see depression manifest in the body?
Yeah. So change in sleep, like the traditional ways, I guess, change in sleep, change in eating, digestion, energy levels, the classic symptoms. If we want to get a bit more of the energetic spiritual perspective, our heart meridian runs up the arm. Like any pain along there tells me something. Shoulder pain is burden and responsibility. Lower back pain is unsupported. I'd look for those sort of things. Inflammation in the body, autoimmune disease, that tells me that there's a heightened stress that you've been living with for a long time, or that a unprocessed stress has been triggered and it's now, often the body will give you a really, intense response. The bigger the symptoms, the bigger the issue.
Are there any coping strategies that you would advise people can employ to manage their depression?
Yeah, so again, it's not a quick fix. It can be a bit of a slow process. Get help, whatever that may be. Find someone to talk to that, can help you with it. I think one thing we discount and one thing that we all lack a little bit of in modern times is just connection. It's so important. You might be a really busy professional woman, so find a networking group, a group that maybe does a lunch or an event, but, connection is so important. For women particularly, be around people. It's so easy to try and, to isolate when we're feeling down. You don't have to tell everyone your deepest, darkest feelings, but, it's a little bit of fake it till you make it for periods of time, not the whole day. The sun and nature, 20 minutes of sunshine every day, it's like a barocca to your mitochondria. It wakes you up, getting out in nature. But, I do saunas and ice baths. I think they're fantastic for your mental health. Yoga, exercise, all of those things, they do really help, but it does take time.
So that engagement with life and that
Yes.
connecting with people
Yes.
and getting back to that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it's that, negotiating, it's that devil on your shoulder saying, stay in bed, it's too hard. Like, just find that the hardest bit is actually deciding. And once you're there, you just get into the rhythm of whatever you've chosen to do.
Yeah. So even if it's just one small thing that you find a bit of joy in, just go for that.
Don't go for joy though. Depression or really deep, a real low to joy, the brain just goes, go away, lady. Like, too much.
Yeah.
I never aspire to joy from depression. Like, I want joy for you. I want it for me. But when you're really low and someone says you are going to be joyful and content and the happiest person in the world, the brain just goes too hard.
Okay.
So, we try and find exactly what you're saying, like a moment. It's like, let the light in enough to do one thing that you couldn't do last time. And then, it's a muscle. We build that resilience. The brain goes, you went to a class last week and you felt a little bit better. Okay, I'll do it again. And we just build it up like that. But aspiring to jump from depression to joy, the brain will say, too much, can't do it.
It's too big a jump.
Too far from where you're at.
When we look at illness broadly, are there some signs we can pay attention to that may be our body's way of signalling that things aren't quite right? So I'll give you an example. Are there any indications that someone may be experiencing the onset of an autoimmune disease before it fully forms? Or are there maybe repeating patterns, like regularly getting sick, but someone doesn't understand why?
Yes.
Does our body try and communicate this with us before it becomes this full-blown disease or illness or chronic condition?
Yes. Yes to everything. Look, autoimmune, it's hard for me to predict. I don't know if a medical professional could. It's the body attacking itself. The symbolism of it is quite extraordinary. It's this heightened stress response, and then the body just goes, you're stressing me out so much. You're the danger, you're the foreign sort of, thing that I need to get rid of. Anecdotally, I see a 7 to 10 year gestation between trauma and the onset of autoimmune disease. I got psoriasis at 17, which is autoimmune, and, had a traumatic event at 7. I know through the work that I've done that was the emotional trigger. And, it played out 10 years later for me. I don't know that there's a lot of things that say, you're heading down the path of a thyroid condition, you're heading down the path of being a celiac. I don't know about that, but any repetitive thing is your body telling you something. So, coming out of lockdowns, a lot of us got sick, and I got bronchitis over and over and over again. So probably 4, maybe 5 times. And, bronchitis in your lungs, grief and sadness, a cough, trying to cough something up to get something out. It's, it has a foundation of like anger and frustration. And, I was feeling all of those things, as we all were, but then there were other things happening in my life that had triggered that as well. So that was absolutely my body saying, deal with this. It's not going away. You can't cough it up. Look at what it's telling you and, process it and deal with it. So absolutely everything is a sign.
Yeah. And we've got to be more in tune with our bodies to look for those signals and listen to them.
Yeah.
Okay. More and more research is coming out to show that repressing emotions is harmful to our bodies. Women in particular, speaking of autoimmune disease, account for about 80% of cases.
Yes.
I don't know if you can speak to this through the work that you do, but why are we seeing such a high correlation between autoimmune in women specifically?
Yeah. So I like to say women implode and men explode. So again, it goes back to that thing where, I'm okay. It's all right. I'll do it. Don't worry about it. We also as women have a tendency to overgive, to people please, to, do something rather than deal with having to, instruct someone in what to do and it not be right. We'd rather do something than deal with the discomfort of it, of having to worry about it. As I said earlier, autoimmune is now proven to be a result of childhood trauma. So women absolutely suffer greatly for autoimmune because it's sort of, when we're not speaking up, when we're not saying, hey, can someone help, or what about me, or that doesn't feel right, or I don't like the way that happened, we're saying we're not important. And, there's a saying, it says, if you avoid a battle with another, you start a war within yourself. That's what autoimmune disease is. Autoimmune disease is I will be okay with you treating me in a way that I don't like, but I'm such a good girl that I'm not going to speak up. There's so many ways to speak up that is polite and respectful, but also firm. And I start hard conversations with, this is a really hard thing for me to say. I would rather not have this conversation with you right now. But if I don't, I'm going to feel terrible, and I just need to talk to you about it. And, it really does get things out, and it avoids us carrying pain, resentment, anger, and things that, aren't ours to have to carry.
And that speaks to that point you made earlier about repressing emotions.
Yes.
And is this why repressing your emotions is so dangerous?
Yes.
Because it can sit in the body and manifest and play out as illness and chronic pain and disease.
Yeah.
Why do we need to address it, I think? I just want to kind of get to the crux of the importance of not ignoring this. Like, why is it so important that we stop suppressing our emotions?
Yeah. So if you had something bad happen to you, you hold it in, you're affected by it, but you aren't the reason that thing happened. So I think we find the word trauma really scary. One of the definitions of trauma, the one that I love, is it's a circumstantial situation in which you think you didn't have the resources to cope and you didn't have anyone to call on to help you. We all experience trauma. There's big T and little t. So there's sort of, death by 1,000 cuts, just constantly dismissed. Your feelings aren't validated. You don't feel seen. You don't feel heard. Those sort of micro things happening over and over again. And then there's, of course, the big trauma, death, abuse, living in a household with someone who's mentally ill or an alcoholic or violent. Everyone thinks of all the big scary things when they think of trauma, but trauma can simply be, I wasn't seen for who I was. People didn't understand me. I'm a really sensitive person, and I was as a child. Like, my parents don't even know where I've come from sometimes. They're just more pragmatic and matter of fact. That's a trauma because they couldn't understand it. So it makes you become a different person. And I wasn't born to be not myself, So if someone's hurt you and you don't do something about it, you're carrying that and it's changing you, affecting you, having a negative impact on you, and they're just getting on with their life. Like, that should be enough for people to go, I want to deal with it.
Mm. What do you think women in particular misunderstand about their health that you would love them to be more aware of?
Okay.
Big question.
Yes, good question. And this is a huge bugbear for me, but it's our reproductive health. From an energetic, spiritual perspective, our reproductive system is our powerhouse. It's where we draw our power. Women have the power of creation, and it doesn't have to be creating babies. It's just we are creative people, and that's where we draw our power. You should not experience painful periods. You should not have debilitating PMS. You know, menopause doesn't have to be terrible. It should be an incredibly liberating experience. It's a rite of passage. I don't want any women to think that, you know, those things are normal. They're not. You know, it's a sign, it's a symptom from your body. It's a sign that, you know, you're not in your power and that you're not happy with the life that you have. You know, it just shouldn't be painful, and I don't think that we understand that. You know, it's a natural, what's the word? It's a natural part of our body. It's supposed to happen. Everything about our reproductive system is supposed to be flow. And so many women suffer, and you just don't have to.
Absolutely. Great point. Does this come back to being more in tune with ourselves and listening to our bodies?
Yes.
What are some things we can do to get more in tune with our bodies?
Stop. Put your phone down. You know, just sit. Even just find 10 minutes a day to just be quiet. You know, just to tune in. It might sound a bit woo-woo, but you'd be surprised how easy it is to just close your eyes, and we say drop into your body. And just, you know, scan your body and see parts that feel heavy or it feels like a block. And, you know, you might just sort of sit and go, okay, you know, what might that be? We can try and conceptualize it. If I'm feeling, you know, a tightness in my chest, what color is it? What shape is it? Am I ready to let that go? And as I breathe, just ask the body, you know, to just release, and you'll lighten the load to some degree. But the more you sit with yourself, the more you understand yourself. That's why, you know, things like meditation and yoga are so powerful, because it's about connecting back into the body. So you're almost checking in to say, how am I today?
Great. I want to start to wrap up now, and I think it would be great to end on a point that's something women can take away today. So what's something small that women can do to make the step towards becoming more healthier and happier within themselves?
I would love every woman to believe that they were not born to live a life of limitation. You know, it almost makes me emotional. You know, we've got so much potential, and I don't believe that I was here to live a half life, to sacrifice myself for other people, to, you know, dance to the beat of another person's drum. You know, I want to be the best version of myself, and I want to help other people do that too. If you're not happy, if life's hard, you know, if you feel limited, you've got choices. They might not always be the two best choices you've ever had in your life, but you have the ability to influence your circumstances. You have the ability to change. You have the ability to be healthier and happier, you know, and it can just be those little steps that say, do something different, make a choice I haven't made before. And the brain goes, and then what? And then what? You know, we often tell ourselves, I can't, I won't, it's too hard. What if you just said to yourself, today I'm going to take a chance, because the worst thing that can happen is I'm going to feel the same as I did yesterday. But the best thing that could happen is I'm going to feel a bit better. And then I'm going to take another chance, and then I'm going to feel a bit better. You know, it's just anything is possible if you choose to believe that you have the right to be the happiest version of yourself.
So just take that small step each day.
Little step, just a little step.
And build it up from there.
Yeah, it's like depression to joy. We're not trying to take this big step. Just a little thing every day can make a huge change, huge impact.
Thank you so much for everything you shared with us today. I am sure everyone listening will take away something helpful from this chat that we've had. And I just want to say how grateful I am that you've extended your knowledge and your time with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to She Defined. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or leave a review. I've been your host, Sharon Green, and you can learn more about She Defined at shedefined.com.au.